I have launched a podcast, and in this video, I'm going to be talking all about that journey to launching the podcast and some of the things that I've learned. So today is super exciting because it's the first day of interviews for my podcast. I'm launching a podcast and I've got the interviews, the first interviews today. I'm doing 3 interviews with 3 amazing people: Mark Schaefer, Kate Erickson, and Marcus Sheridan. So I've got my lesson plans created, I've got my podcast show notes and plans created, and now I'm just super excited to interview these amazing people who are super talented, and I'm very grateful to also call friends. So what I did yesterday was essentially just took the flow of the podcast. So it's a 25-minute show and it's broken up into different segments. And this is the show notes for Mark Schaefer, who's the first guest. And you can see here I've got all the questions, all the things I want to talk to him about, all the different segments laid out. So it should make it easier for me when I'm actually shooting these podcasts to stay on time, make sure I get all the segments right, and make sure that the show flows nicer. Not gonna lie, feeling a little bit nervous about these podcast interviews. When I've gone out and asked all the guests to be on the show, literally everyone has said yes. And I've almost been blown away by the kindness that everyone has given me in saying yes to being on this show. And having been on so many podcasts, I know what makes a good podcast, I know what makes a bad podcast, and I really want to make this podcast great. And I really want to make it an enjoyable experience for both the guest, for me, and for the listener. So I'm just a little bit nervous. It's just those, I think it's that pre-football match nerves that you get. It's like good nerves. So there's a few hours until the first podcast interview. So I'm just going through show notes, just going over the questions I want to ask the guests, just to make sure they are the best questions I can ask them. I have launched my first ever podcast. The Funnily Enough Show has gone live, and I want to use this next 5-10 minutes to talk about the journey of launching a podcast, how I've done it, some of the things that I've learned, and some of the cool things that have happened as a result. But first, why have I decided to launch a podcast? Because aren't there lots and lots and lots of podcasts out there already? And don't I already have enough stuff to do? Creating videos, creating academy workshops and contents, doing calls with clients, running client accounts? Yeah, that's probably a good question to ask. But I've always loved the idea of having my own podcast. In fact, I did have a kind of mini side project podcast called The Scotland Show that I used to run a couple of years ago. And I just really enjoyed the medium of creating content through voice. You know, like when you're creating a piece of video, you have to make sure that the background looks all right. You need to make sure that you got the right audio. You need to make sure that the camera and the lighting is all set up, which is fun and I really enjoy doing it, but sometimes it's not the most convenient. Like sometimes you just don't look good, right? In podcasting, all you really need is a microphone and you can just speak and upload it and it goes to all of the different platforms. And I've just always really enjoyed just sitting down and chatting. I mean, working from home as a business owner, that's kind of what I do all day anyway, just sit and speak to myself. They ask you how you are. So podcasting is perfect for that. The idea to launch the podcast has probably been in the works for the last 4, 5, 6 months. I think the whole year, to be honest, I've wanted to launch a new podcast, but the time was never right. At the beginning of the year, I was focusing on trying to rebrand and get the Mr. Gavin Bell brand the way I wanted it to, and then we were focusing on creating video content and getting that content process nailed. And it's only in the last few weeks that I decided, like, right, now we're ready to launch the podcast. And so the process has been a really exciting and fun journey. I've really enjoyed every second of launching a podcast. First of all, it was all about coming up with the name and the topic of the show. Now, one of the things that's really, really important for me is to make sure that the show is related to the business. That's why I've called it the Funnily Enough Show. It's all about marketing and I'm interviewing marketing people. I didn't want to ask the same questions to the same people. So what I did was I went onto my Instagram stories and I asked everybody, what is your favorite thing about the podcast that you listen to? And 2 things came from that. There was one, they loved the shows that just felt like 2 friends having a conversation in a pub. They really enjoyed the chemistry. And the second thing was actionable advice, things that they can learn and then go and implement. So I said to myself, okay, Let's try and create a short show because business owners and entrepreneurs are relatively short on time. And let's create something that feels like it's two friends having a chat, but also give the listeners something to take away. So I wanted to come up with a show that was fun, engaging, but informative at the same time. And I feel like the Funnily Enough show, that pun, kind of does everything there. It's related to the business, which means I can use it to grow the business, the brand, and to get potential customers and clients. And I think that research part, by asking people on my Instagram what they like the most about podcasts, was really, really important, because without that feedback, I wouldn't have had something to steer the way that I wanted the show to become. That was coming up with the topic. The next part was ensuring that I had all the equipment that I needed. Now, with a podcast, you actually don't need anything other than your phone. You can pick up your phone and record a voice note if you wanted to. I, however, have all this equipment. This is a Rode Podcaster microphone. Now, this wasn't actually bought for the podcast itself, but it's a really good mic, and I use this for the podcast. So in terms of equipment, you actually don't need anything other than a phone, because there's lots of products and softwares out there in the market like Anchor that allow you to just record a podcast, record something into your phone and upload it, and then it'll automatically just send it to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, and all the other different platforms. So it's very easy now. You don't need equipment to start a podcast, which is very, very exciting. And the final thing that I needed to do was to find a host for the podcast. Now, there's lots of different hosts out there. I have the option of going on Anchor and doing it for free, but I have decided to go for Captivate.fm. It's $9 a month, and it's just a really, really nice platform for hosting a podcast. So what I do is I get the files created. So I record the interviews, I send them to an editor, the editor sends it back, and then we upload them to Captivate. And Captivate is just a really simple and nice way that walks you through creating your podcast and then creating each episode. So it makes it easy for me to add the title, create a specific image for specific episodes, to add the show notes, to add URLs. Just very, very simple and easy, and walks you through everything that you need to know, which is vital for me as someone that's never really had a proper podcast show before. I don't really know what I'm doing, but Captivate has made that journey and that learning process so much easier for me. But I've had a little bit of an interesting strategy when it comes to the podcast launch, because one of the things that I really want to do is to rank highly in the charts on iTunes, hopefully get new and noteworthy, and therefore get lots more people seeing my podcast for the first time when I launch. So what I did was I launched the podcast last week with a trailer episode. It's a 1-minute episode, which basically tells them what the podcast is all going to be about. Now, this is really good for two things. It means that I can get my podcast onto iTunes faster, because I can essentially create the podcast in iTunes without releasing the shows. And this is important because iTunes takes like 4 or 5 days, sometimes longer, to approve your podcast. So it got me there first. And it means that I can also do pre-marketing on the podcast before it actually launches. I can say to people, look, listen to this 1-minute trailer. If it's interesting to you, then you can subscribe to the show here. And that means I've got subscribers waiting for when I officially launch, which is today. So I launched that trailer last week, and I officially launched today, and I've already got subscribers, already have reviews and ratings, and we're already ranking something like 15th in the marketing charts on Apple Podcasts, which is amazing. And now today, when we're launching, rather than just launching one first episode, I've launched 5 episodes. And the reason for this is because I want to try and drive as many people to my podcast in the first few days as possible. So iTunes sees that spike in traffic. They see lots of people coming here, and hopefully then add me to new and noteworthy, meaning more and more people come to the podcast, and it kind of triggers the algorithm to show it to more people, and therefore we get more listeners. It's all just a way to try and drive as many people to the podcast as possible in the first few days, to try and get that new and noteworthy. Now, if you're interested in listening to the show, head over to Apple Podcasts or any of your favorite podcasting platforms and just type in the Funnily Enough Show. You'll see my face there with a nice pinky red background, and go there and hit subscribe. And if you're feeling nice, leave a little 5-star review, because it is going to help the podcast reach more people and ultimately have a bigger and better impact, because the guests that I've got on the show are just world class, and some of the things that they've shared so far are just incredible. So I cannot wait for you to listen to that. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit like, be sure to drop a comment, be sure to subscribe here, as well as Apple Podcasts. Wow, I'm asking for a lot today. And as always, I shall see you in the next video.